One twin is jealous of the other's beauty and swaps identities to steal her life, temporarily. Alara and Seraphine Hale were identical in face but not in fate. Born in the sleepy town of Raventon, they shared the same blue eyes, raven-black hair and porcelain skin. But while Alara, the elder twin by 7 minutes, was the graceful darling of the town, Seraphine lived in her shadow, dismissed as the quiet one, or the other twin. Seraphine, now 24, wore her resentment like perfume, unseen but always present. Alara, always dressed in flowing pastel dresses and radiant with smiles, had recently been crowned the local beauty ambassador. Seraphine, usually clad in darker clothes with eyes that held silent storms, worked behind the scenes at the town library. No one noticed her unless they needed a book or a whispered insult. What no one knew was that Seraphine had studied her sister's every move for years, not just her speech or gait, but her patterns, passwords, even the scent of her perfume. She had memorized them like spells. And tonight, Seraphine stood before the mirror, dressed in Alara's pale pink lace dress, mimicking her voice and brushing her hair into the same glossy waves. Tonight wasn't just another performance, it was the beginning of a plan to become her sister. Seraphine had always believed that Alara's life was the one that should have been hers. The attention, the admiration, the soft-spoken compliments whispered as she walked past, the kind of life that glowed under a spotlight. Seraphine had lived in the shadows of that light for too long, her worth always measured against her twin's radiant charm. But it hadn't always been this way. As children, they had been inseparable. Alara had once clung to Seraphine during storms, begged to sleep in her bed when the nightmares came. But somewhere around high school, something shifted. Alara bloomed into beauty, kindness, and grace. Seraphine remained behind, introverted, analytical, and often cold. Their paths forked, and Alara never looked back. What truly enraged Seraphine wasn't just her sister's beauty, it was how effortless her life seemed. Their parents praised Alara's achievements, her boyfriend adored her, and even the mayor had once joked about Alara running for office someday. All while Seraphine watched from the background, her own voice muted by comparison. But now Seraphine had rehearsed enough. Her plan was detailed down to the last second. She would disappear for a few days, only it wouldn't be Seraphine who vanished, it would be Alara. Alara was due to travel to a wellness retreat for 3 days, a private getaway she'd kept secret from nearly everyone. The perfect window, Seraphine thought. She had intercepted the booking confirmation weeks earlier, copied the itinerary, and memorized every detail. The night before Alara was set to leave, Seraphine made her move. She waited until her sister was asleep, then drugged her chamomile tea. Alara barely stirred as Seraphine gently dressed her in pajamas and carried her to the basement of their childhood home, the one no one visited anymore. Seraphine had already soundproofed the walls and secured it with locks she alone had keys to. With Alara unconscious and hidden away, Seraphine took a deep breath, slipped into her sister's travel clothes, grabbed the suitcase, and set off for the retreat. She had practiced Alara's voice, her laugh, her walk, everything. She smiled at the mirror one last time and said, "I'm Alara Hale, and I'm ready to reclaim my life." What Seraphine didn't know was that she wasn't just stealing Alara's life, she was walking into a web her sister had carefully woven. A web of secrets and lies waiting to entangle the impersonator. The retreat was nestled in the misty cliffs of Avalon Bay, an exclusive and secluded escape for the elite. As Seraphine checked in under Alara's name, she was met with warm smiles and familiarity from the staff. Clearly, Alara had been here before. Seraphine played her role flawlessly, mirroring her sister's soft gestures and breezy tone. Over the next 2 days, she mingled with the other guests, earning compliments and affirming nods. She felt powerful, desired, and for the first time, seen. Not as Seraphine, but as Alara. The attention was intoxicating, but she also began to notice odd things. Guests would mention events or conversations Alara supposedly had with them, none of which Seraphine recognized. One woman even whispered, "Still haven't told anyone, huh?" with a knowing smile. A man she didn't know called her darling and referred to last weekend. It didn't add up. Seraphine brushed it off, thinking Alara must have been seeing someone behind her boyfriend's back or hiding a double life. But the deeper she fell into her sister's identity, the more she felt like she wasn't in control of the game anymore. She had become the face of someone whose life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. On the third night, as Seraphine lay in Alara's retreat bed, a knock echoed through the room. She opened the door to find a middle-aged man in a sharp black suit. His eyes were cold and he didn't smile. "Alara," he said sternly, "we need to talk. You've delayed this long enough." Seraphine's heart thudded, but she nodded calmly and invited him in, pretending she knew what he was referring to. He sat across from her, placed a black envelope on the table and said, "This isn't just about you anymore. You know what's at stake. If you don't go through with it, we'll all suffer the consequences." Before Seraphine could respond, he stood up and left. Inside the envelope were photographs, blurry images of people exchanging packages, shadowed faces, and a list of names with addresses. One name was circled in red, hers, or rather Alara's. Seraphine's blood ran cold. Her sister had been involved in something dangerous, very dangerous. She had thought she was stealing a perfect life. But what she had really done was step into the center of a storm, and now she had to survive it without exposing the truth. In the damp, locked basement, Alara stirred for the first time. Groggy and confused, she tried to sit up, only to realize she was bound to a chair. Panic surged through her veins as flashes of memory returned. A yawn, then darkness. "Alara," she whispered, confused at her own name. Then the truth hit her. Seraphine. Tears welled up, not just from fear, but from heartbreak. Her twin, her own sister, had done this to her. But Alara wasn't weak, not anymore. She studied the basement. Though it had been made secure, she noticed one flaw, a small ventilation panel with rusted screws. It wouldn't be easy, but if she could shift her weight she might reach it. She had to. Because whatever Seraphine was doing in her name, it had to be stopped. Not just for Alara's sake, but for everyone who might be dragged into the chaos Seraphine had just unlocked. Seraphine had expected beauty, admiration, and perhaps a few shallow lies when she stepped into Alara's shoes. But not espionage, blackmail, or dangerous men in tailored suits. The photographs from the envelope haunted her. She'd spent the entire night staring at them, flipping through the stack, hoping to make sense of what Alara had gotten herself into. At breakfast the next morning, one of the guests, a quiet woman named Miriam, sat beside her and said, "You shouldn't have come back here. After what happened last time, I thought you were smarter." Seraphine gave a polite smile, masking her confusion, and replied vaguely, "I needed closure." Miriam's face darkened. "Closure, Alara, you burn bridges with people who don't forget. You don't get to walk away twice." Seraphine realized she was in deep, deeper than she ever imagined. Her sister had lived a double life, and she'd waltzed right into it, completely unarmed. She had two choices now: abandon the game and confess, or fully commit and uncover the truth behind the secrets Alara left behind. She chose the latter, because Seraphine wasn't just going to play the part anymore, she was going to master it. Back in Raventon, things were beginning to unravel. Seraphine had left subtle traces of her presence while assuming Alara's identity, answering texts too formally, hesitating at familiar names, calling the family dog by the wrong nickname. And though Alara's boyfriend Cole hadn't voiced his suspicions yet, his eyes told a different story. Cole had been Alara's partner for 2 years, a tall, broad-shouldered man with an easy smile and observant eyes. The kind of man who remembered the smallest details, like the curve of Alara's signature or the scent she wore on rainy days. When Seraphine called him one evening and referred to his mother as Anne instead of Mrs. Whitmore, he paused, then said nothing, but something had shifted. Meanwhile, Alara, still trapped in the basement, had managed to partially loosen the ventilation panel. Her arms were bruised, her lips dry, but her will had not wavered. Every second that passed, she feared what Seraphine was doing in her name, and what might happen if she didn't escape soon. Seraphine believed she was pulling strings, but in truth she was weaving a noose around her own neck. Seraphine returned to the retreat room and spread out the photos from the envelope again, determined to decode the mystery. One address stood out. It was in Raventon, just outside town limits. It belonged to a woman named Isla Varn, a name she didn't recognize. That night, unable to suppress her curiosity, she left the retreat early and drove to the address. The house was nestled between woods and cornfields, run down yet lived in. She knocked once. Isla, a wiry woman with silver-streaked hair and mistrustful eyes, opened the door. Her face froze when she saw Seraphine. "Alara," she whispered. "Are you insane?" Seraphine played along. "I had to come. I need to talk privately." Inside, Seraphine learned more than she bargained for. Isla had been part of an underground whistleblower ring, exposing corrupt local politicians and dangerous businessmen. Alara had joined them under a false name, using her charm to gather intel. But the last time she came to Isla, she'd confessed that someone had discovered her secret, and she feared for her life. Isla stared at Seraphine and said, "You left us, and now you're back. You'd better know what you're doing, because if you don't, we're all dead." Cole sat at the cafe, stirring his coffee absently, his mind replaying every strange interaction he'd had with Alara over the last week. She'd flinched at his touch. She never hummed while washing dishes. She suddenly started biting her nails, a habit Alara had broken 3 years ago. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos, comparing smiles, angles of her head, even the tilt of her handwriting from a recent note she left him on the fridge. Something was off. He didn't want to believe it, because the truth would be madness. But he had always known about the rivalry between Alara and her sister. The bitter glances, the quiet competition, the strange way Seraphine watched Alara with eyes full of something that wasn't quite love. He picked up his keys and headed to the Hale family house. He needed answers, and he would start in the one place no one had touched for years, the basement. Meanwhile, Seraphine, shaken by Isla's revelations, returned to her borrowed life. For the first time, fear crept into her confidence. The thrill of pretending was fading, reality was catching up, and somewhere beneath Raventon, the real Alara was starting to claw her way back to the surface. Cole arrived at the Hale family home under the pretense of returning Alara's scarf. No one was home, so he used the spare key Alara had given him long ago, something the imposter never asked for back. He walked the halls with growing unease, noticing small details. The wrong pictures moved, Alara's favorite mug dusty from disuse. The silence was too thick, unnatural. Then he made his way to the basement door. It was locked. That was odd. The Hales never locked the basement. It had been empty for years, used only for old furniture and boxes of childhood memories. But now a brand new lock sealed it shut. Cole hesitated for only a second before heading to the shed to grab a crowbar. Moments later, the door creaked open and the cold, musty air rushed out. At the bottom of the stairs he saw her, Alara, pale, weak, but alert. Her wrists were raw, her hair a mess, but her eyes still held fire. She looked up at him and croaked, "Cole, it's me." Cole knelt beside her, eyes wide. "My God, what the hell is going on?" And just like that, the illusion began to collapse. Cole wasted no time. He helped Alara up the stairs, his arms steady around her trembling form. Her voice was weak, but her words were sharp and clear as she recounted everything. How Seraphine drugged her, stole her identity, and vanished. Cole's face grew grimmer with each sentence. Back at his apartment, Alara showered, changed into fresh clothes, and stared into the mirror. Really stared. For the first time in days, her reflection no longer looked soft and innocent. There was rage in her eyes and determination hardening every line on her face. Seraphine hadn't just impersonated her. She had invaded her world, her secrets, and worse, put others in danger. Alara had fought hard to protect people through her undercover work with Isla and the whistleblower group. Her double life was a necessary risk. Now it was compromised. "I'm going to stop her," she told Cole, voice low and even. "But I need to be smart. We can't just expose her. Not yet. Not while she's pretending to be me." Cole nodded. "Then what do we do?" Alara smiled, cold, calculating. "We make her believe she's in control while we take everything back." Seraphine was unraveling. Her confidence, once intoxicating, had thinned to dread. Every smile she wore felt heavier now. Every nod she gave in Alara's name felt like a lie she couldn't hold together. Worse, Cole hadn't answered her last message. That wasn't like him. She was starting to feel watched. Her paranoia crept into every corner of her day. People at the retreat were still dropping hints, knowing glances, unfinished sentences. It was becoming clear. Alara's life had layers Seraphine never anticipated. She returned to Raventon thinking she could regroup, but she found subtle shifts everywhere. A note from Cole on the door inviting her to dinner. Flowers on the table, Alara's favorite kind, lilacs. But Seraphine had always hated their smell. At dinner, Cole was too warm, too charming. He poured her wine, asked gentle questions, smiled with soft intensity. It was a trap. She felt it but couldn't prove it. So she played along. But what Seraphine didn't know was that every word she spoke, every lie she spun, was being recorded. Cole had planted a small device beneath the dining table. Alara listened from the car outside, every syllable etching her plan deeper into motion. Alara had always been cautious. Her work as an informant within a network of corrupt elites demanded it. But she had never anticipated a betrayal from within her own family. Now, that betrayal had given her a terrifying advantage. She could watch herself from the outside. She could see how others reacted to her through Seraphine's performance. And most importantly, she could identify who was a threat and who trusted the imposter. With Cole's recordings, she mapped out Seraphine's weaknesses, the way she oversmiled when nervous, how she paused before recalling Alara's memories. She even said things Alara never would. Abrasive comments, selfish remarks. It wouldn't be long before people started questioning Alara's behavior. Meanwhile, Alara reconnected with Isla. Together, they began reassembling the whistleblower network Seraphine had unknowingly endangered. Isla, furious but pragmatic, agreed to help. "She's going to ruin everything you built," Isla warned. "She already has," Alara replied. "Now I need to burn the ruins down and rise from them." She was no longer hiding in her twin's shadow. Now she was the storm coming to reclaim her life. Seraphine stood before a full-length mirror, wrapped in Alara's silk robe, her makeup perfectly done, her hair curled into gentle waves. And yet all she saw was a fraud. Her hands trembled as she brushed lipstick across her mouth. The color bled slightly at the edges. She was losing grip, she knew it. People were asking questions. Her co-workers noticed she was less empathetic. Cole was colder, quieter, watching her too closely. The town barista had asked if she'd switched perfumes. It was all unraveling. She tried reaching out to the retreat again, only to find the staff denying she had ever stayed there. The man in the black suit had vanished. Miriam's phone number was disconnected. It was as if her connection to Alara's secret life had been scrubbed clean. And then someone knocked at her door. She opened it slowly, heart pounding. There, standing on the porch, was Alara, dressed in Seraphine's usual dark coat, hair tied back tightly, lips pressed in a thin line. "Hello, sister," Alara said. "Mind if I come in?" Seraphine's heart stopped. The game was no longer in her hands. They sat across from each other in silence, the living room thick with unspoken rage. Seraphine, still wearing Alara's skin, her tone, her stolen confidence, tried to find her footing. But Alara's stare cut through her like ice. "You've ruined everything," Alara began. Her voice was steady but laced with fury. "You think you were stepping into a fantasy life. You walked into something far darker." Seraphine scoffed. "You're not a saint, Alara. You've lied to everyone. Maybe I did us both a favor." Alara leaned forward. "I lied to protect people. You lied to destroy me." Seraphine's eyes flickered. "I didn't mean to, not all of it. I just wanted to be seen, just once." "You were always seen," Alara said quietly. "You just hated the reflection." The silence that followed felt like the drop before a scream. Alara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the recordings Cole had made. She placed a small device on the table, let it play. Seraphine's voice filled the room, slipping, stammering, contradicting. Her mask was shattered, and for the first time she realized she hadn't just stolen Alara's life, she had given her sister the power to destroy hers. Seraphine sat frozen as her own voice echoed through the room. Each recording unraveled her fabricated world thread by thread. The image she'd worked so hard to construct was collapsing, and she could feel it crumbling under the weight of her own ambition. Alara watched her silently, arms crossed, jaw tight, her face cold but not smug. There was no joy in her eyes, only heartbreak and disappointment. "I should turn you in," Alara said, her voice sharp as a blade. "I should let the world see what you did." Seraphine stood abruptly. "I did what I had to. You think I wanted this life? To always be the forgotten twin? No one forgot you," Alara snapped. "You made yourself invisible because you refused to accept the light you already had. You chose envy over effort." Seraphine's chest rose and fell quickly, her breathing shallow. Her eyes darted toward the door, the windows, everywhere but her sister. But there was no exit now. She had stolen too much, crossed too many lines. Her performance was over. "I never meant to hurt you," she muttered. But it was too late. Alara stared at her, then quietly said, "You didn't just hurt me, you endangered lives, and now you'll answer for it." Alara didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, she made a different choice. She led Seraphine to the basement, the very place she had been imprisoned. The air was thick with tension, and Seraphine's footsteps echoed behind Alara's, uncertain and quiet. "I want you to see where I was, what you did," Alara said, flicking on the dim light. Seraphine's face paled as she took in the cold concrete floor, the rusted vent, the worn chair still in the center of the room with its loosened restraints. "I didn't know it would be like this. You planned it," Alara replied. "You built it. You just didn't think I'd fight back." Silence again. Alara turned to her sister. "I'm not going to press charges yet, but you're going to undo what you did. You're going to disappear, just like you made me disappear, and you're going to stay gone." Seraphine swallowed hard. "And if I don't," Alara's voice dropped to a whisper, "then I expose everything, to everyone, and you'll spend the rest of your life explaining why you pretended to be your own twin, why you almost got people killed." Seraphine nodded slowly, tears rising in her eyes. "I'll go," but Alara wasn't finished with her just yet. 2 days later, Seraphine was gone. Alara had made sure of it. She packed her sister's belongings into a single suitcase, bought her a one-way bus ticket under a different name, and handed her just enough money to survive, but not enough to return. Seraphine left without fanfare, without goodbyes. She didn't cry when the bus pulled away. She'd done too much damage for tears. She simply looked out the window, face blank, as her hometown shrank behind her. Back in Raventon, Alara resumed her life, but it would never be the same. She met with Isla, explained what had happened, and began carefully rebuilding her connections. The group had been rattled by the impersonation, but Alara's honesty and willingness to return to the fight restored their trust. To the public, Alara gave a different explanation. She claimed she'd taken a short sabbatical, a much-needed break after a stressful year. Only Cole, Isla, and a handful of others knew the truth. But behind closed doors she never stopped watching, just in case Seraphine ever tried to come back, because once someone's willing to steal your face, you can never truly turn your back on them. Months passed, the town of Raventon returned to its rhythm. Alara became more cautious, more guarded, but also stronger. Her secrets no longer felt like weights, they were shields, tools, lessons carved from pain. She stood before the mirror one evening, the same one Seraphine had once used to mimic her smile. Now Alara stared into it, not to fix her appearance but to understand herself. She saw the scars left behind, the strength forged from betrayal, the clarity that only comes from nearly losing everything. And then she took the mirror off the wall, shattered it, not out of anger but as a symbol. She didn't need to see her reflection anymore to know who she was. Somewhere, Seraphine was still out there. Perhaps she had started over, perhaps she hadn't learned. But Alara was no longer afraid. She had survived the worst kind of enemy, the one that wore her own face, and now she would never be fooled again. If you found this story gripping, filled with suspense and emotion, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more twisted tales of identity, betrayal, and redemption. Until next time, stay sharp and trust no mirror.